The Human Centipede 2 wasn't shot in black and white. Color simply ran away from it. Now, I don't know... The world? The heck? Oh, now you're gonna do that contrast thing and the tilty camera thing. What the heck is going on here? Huh. Now, I'm not sure which is worse. The fact that we've taken a favorite lesbian porn position and turned it into a horror franchise, or the fact that this franchise is actually getting better as the series progresses. Now, considering that the villain in the third movie is going to be the same one from the second one, it almost seems like the Human Centipede 1 was created just to validate the other two, which, if that's the case, it kind of almost works. Oh god. So, the premise of the Human Centipede 2 is basically an overglorification of the first movie, except this time it focuses around the mentally deranged Martin, who's a parking garage security attendant in London. I know, the same London that banned this movie. Whatever. Anyway, being a victim of the whole "my parents didn't love me" thing, Martin becomes kind of obsessed with the original Human Centipede movie and sets out on a mission to create a larger centipede of his own. For those of you playing the home game, a centipede in this case is a series of 12 people sewn together butt to mouth for the sake of creating a single digestive tract. Aha! I have done it! The gummy centipede! Using non-lethal tools like guns and obscenely sloshy-sounding blows to the head with a crowbar, Martin abducts a group of cliché social misfits, locks them in the most suspicious-looking van in the UK, and eventually makes his obsession a reality. There we go. The biggest issue that I had with this movie was its dependence on the convenience of ignorance. Gaping plot holes and obvious logical obstacles were blatantly ignored for the sake of keeping the movie sick and twisted. And there were questions like, how does mentally deranged Martin get a gun? Or get a job? Or get a driver's license for that matter? And how long were these people locked up in this van, and why didn't any of them die from blood loss or starvation? And to these questions, there was only really one answer I can come up with. It must be a London thing. On top of that, characters were simply thrown in for the sake of adding to the perverted reputation the franchise felt it had to live up to. From psycho mothers to sex-starved old psychiatrists to pregnant women. Really? Pregnant women? Human Centipede 2 seemed to think that by being more offensive, you were in fact being scarier. Which is like saying that adding ponies and singing and rainbows to the Saw series makes it more of a kids franchise. The problem with horror movies that tend to center around the torture porn mechanic is that they usually involve characters that the audience doesn't mind watching die. We don't really feel there's much of a loss there. Hell, the pregnant woman in this movie seemed like she was going to sell her kid for drug money. And for that I wasn't that bothered. Sympathy is the driving force of fear. I would have been a lot more afraid of the Human Centipede 2 if I actually wanted one of the characters to survive the ordeal. Despite that this movie regularly sacrificed intelligence for things that made you go, ugh, there was one aspect of this movie that I found expertly handled and quite captivating, which was the character study of Martin. Now, Martin never had any lines or anything. He just kind of giggled and squealed and would occasionally cry if things didn't go according to plan. And when he got frustrated, his anger just kind of took over, and he almost felt pity for the guy. Kind of like watching a short kid try to get cookies off the tall shelf. He approached his madness with like a childish glee, kind of like one of those lunatics from A House of a Thousand Corpses. And I can't help but think that if I were able to throw all logic out the window, and under a different director, and kind of under a different story, Martin could have been one of the iconic serial killers of the modern cinema era. The Human Centipede needed a sequel, like the Geico Cavemen needed a TV series. But luckily, just like the show, this is only going to last 3 episodes. With all the gut-wrenching, nausea-inducing, overly ridiculous special effects, more plot holes than Lost if you just skipped every other episode, and a general concept that should have its director thrown in jail simply for having it,
You'd think that The Human Centipede 2 deserves to be cast into the fiery pits of my microwave, never to torment my DVD collection again. However, it did do what it set out to do, and it did it immensely effectively. Martin's character was downright diabolical, despite the world around him not really making much sense. And my stomach did churn a bit watching victims' rubber bands, or ligaments, get sliced into two, pouring out pools of chocolate syrup. Blood, while Martin danced around them giddy that this constant failure finally did something right for a change. I don't know. I can't honestly give this movie a 1 simply for the sake of getting to destroy it. I mean, it was an absolute travesty, but too often are we met with horror movies that feast on the supernatural or some psycho killer with a disappointing motive that to discredit this movie for simply being obscene, considering that I discredit so many other horror movies for simply being cliche, would just be unfair. The Human Centipede 2 is sick and twisted. It's dark and disturbing. It'll probably make you think twice about making fun of short, balding fat men who masturbate with sandpaper. The fact that it pulls off being so grotesque doesn't make it a good movie, because everything else about it sucked. The acting, sans Martin, was pretty atrocious. The sounds and effects were done to kind of Looney Tunes hilarity, and the pacing of the story gave it no real inkling as to how slow or fast time was moving. Kind of like it didn't really exist at all. But this wasn't out to win any Academy Awards or anything, as are most of the cult classics nowadays that just seem a little bit too far-fetched to make it out of the planning phase. Think like Big Lebowski or Rocky Horror Picture Show. Hell, even Star Wars. I give The Human Centipede 2 a low, but probably still surprising 3 Dustbusters out of 10, and hope that its director, Tom Six, still lives by his movie's example to eat shit and die. Seriously? That's what that switch does? I've been living here 2 years. Aha! I have done it! The gummy centipede!